Imagine sua história como uma linha do tempo. Quantos altos e baixos já viveu? Superações, obstáculos.
A verdade é que essa linha não é assim tão linear. Inúmeros fatores, internos e externos, influenciam o tempo todo nossas jornadas.
There are internal and external factors that make our journey singular and complex. But what if we were responsible for stimuli that could impact positively a whole life? And what if we created opportunities to mitigate vulnerabilities and somehow change a trajectory? We believe that yes, this is possible. And that is why since 2003 we support inspiring projects with the objective of incentivizing this social protagonism. We believe we can generate an impact today so that happier versions of this history can be written in a near future. CPFL Institute, energy that transforms realities. Good evening and welcome to another celebration of the 20 years of the Institute CPFL. The story started here in Campinas in 2003, and for the past 20 years it was from Campinas that the Institute has broadened its operations to whole Brazil and became an investment and social platform of investments for CPFL, and the guests today are the Anelo Institute, a partner for schools for children and teenagers for music, and Djamila Ribeiro, the philosopher, and Leandro Karnal, the historian. And this year we have the success of 20 years of Café Filosófico. And among the celebrations, let me call the CEO of the CPFL Energy CEO, Mr. Estrela. Let's have an applause for them. Good evening. I have to greet the presence of Ms. Alexandra Caprioli, the Secretary of Culture and Tourism, representing Mr. Dario Saad, the Mayor of Campinas, and the presence of Fernando Vanin, the Secretary of Sport and Leisure of the City of Campinas, and other authorities. Good evening. I believe it's a huge pleasure for us to be here celebrating. And once again, 20 years of the Institute CPFL, 20 years of so much history, and a history that fills CPFL with pride. CPFL, for all of us employees, we have it very clear that our role goes beyond just delivering energy with quality to the households of all of you. I believe this role of the Institute is key and complements the role that CPFL has in society. In 20 years of history, we wrote so much history about everything we have done, we have learned, impacted the societies that are around our businesses. Our challenge is looking ahead and see what we can do more for our communities, for our country. I believe our challenge here is taking this responsibility and taking the main character role to have a better country, a safer country, a country with more opportunities for everyone. And I believe we do that by taking education, health, supporting all the communities that are around our business through several programs that we have. And I think Café Filosófico is our program that leads all the actions that are connected to culture and has a huge impact and coverage, a program with over 20 years. Café Filosófico has over 1,000 programs and a very relevant presence in social media with over 1 million people in our network, over 40 million views of our videos. And so we believe that bringing culture, bringing debate to the population in our concession areas really makes a difference. We have other programs too. We have our CPFL in hospitals, which is a program that fills us with pride. We have a partnership with hospitals and clinics in our concession area. So we have solar panels to reduce their bills and bringing a financial support to all of them, bringing health to the population, such a needy area that we have. And more recently, we have launched CPFL Young Generation, which is a program in which we are going to support the youth with sports and cultural activities after their school time. And our expectations is for next year to be able to impact positively over 10,000 young people with our actions. So this is what we are talking about. What can the Institute do? What impact it has outside and also inside, in our business, in our communities, in our employees. We believe that with all of that, we have a program that is sustainable on the long run. We're not here just to do business for the next 20, 30, 100 years, but really continue positively impacting the population in our concession areas. And today is a very emblematic day. It's 20 years of history, and it gives us strength to really look ahead and see what else we can do. And we walk with our partners internally. We have the huge support of our employees and also the support of external entities that make a big difference. We are going to see a presentation of the Anello Institute that has a long-term relationship with CPFL Institute, supporting over 1,000 children with singing and instruments classes. You're going to see their presentation, and it's a successful partnership, and I believe we help them and they help us a lot. I was there in the Institute and I was really positively impacted by what they do, all the hard work and the love they put in their work, which is the same thing that us at CPFL have in our business. So I wish you an excellent evening, and I hope you enjoy the day and enjoy by building the history of our institute for the next years. Good evening. Thank you, Gustavo Estrela, for your words. And now I'd like to call the Secretary of Culture and Tourism of the City of Campinas, Ms. Alexandra Caprioli, representing Mr. Dario Saad, the Mayor of Campinas. Applauses for her. Good evening. It is a joy for us to welcome you in this space, and we are so pleased that CPFL chose our theater Castro Mendes to welcome this event, because I believe we have a synergy of thinking, and all the investments that CPFL has done and the long-term partnership that has been established show the importance of the vitality of those investments to our city. So for us, it's a reason for pride to have a company that has a commitment with the city and so many other cities where they have a concession area. But first off, let me thank you on behalf of Gustavo. Thank everyone for this partnership. I have to mention that also have to greet Mario Mazzilli and the whole team of the Institute, Dani, that is ahead of the team, and her team, Tianzim, a long run friend that connects with the secretary. But I want to say that we are really pleased when we can see the impact the purposes can cause in the spaces. And what CPFL does, as you said, more than just being an energy concessionary by having works like the Institute CPFL does in so many works. We have received other projects in the outskirts of the city, and it causes impact. But it is the commitment with the social, the sport, and cultural impact, the one that really pleases us, because we know that the society needs it. And just a reference that for us, the way you deal with all that is an example for all of us, and it's an inspiration. And we are very pleased to be partners with you. And it shows the directions we want for our city, having companies that are committed not only with service provision, but with the future of the city, what we want for our citizens. And so for me, it is very remarkable to bring someone as Djamila, someone I really admire, and Karnal, who is an icon in Café Filosófico. So for us, we are really proud of being part of all that. And finally, just because you say everything you do is energy, this energy is the transformative energy, and everything that we do as an impact, it impacts, of course, the future. So congratulations and thank you for the partnership. And on behalf of Mr. Mayor, congratulate you for 20 years of the Institute.
Obrigado.
Let me thank Ms. Alexandra and thank the partnership of the Culture and Tourism Secretariat and everyone in the Theater Castro Mendes, and talk about Mr. Leandro Vanin, the Secretary of Sport and Leisure of the city of Campinas. And to start our celebrations, let me call the partners of Instituto CPFL in Young Generation, the musicians of the Anelo Institute. Applauses for them.
Eu vou pedir mais aplausos agora para o fundador do Instituto Anelo.
More applauses now for the founder of the Anelo Institute, Lucas Soares.
Boa noite.
Good evening. Let me start by thanking the CPFL group for this opportunity. Such a simple project of the Campo Grande district in Campinas, 200,000 inhabitants, and the dream of Anelo started in a small street of the Florence neighborhood. A boy who was 16 at the time that saw in music an opportunity of transforming his life and his family's. But so much more happened. It transformed the lives of the community. Anelo is a dream that is carried out by so many people. It's not a person's dream. We had over 10,000 people going on the project, children, young people, and adults. The project is intergenerational, and we serve with this amazing support 1,000 students today. So Anelo is a collective dream, and we are here today, which we consider our place, and it is very special for us. I was asked if I was nervous. No, I'm happy. I'm happy because to get here, so many hands, many of them are here in the audience, so thank you. And if you don't know us yet, we are on social media, and we thank you all so much for this opportunity, because this dream is the dream of a boy, me at 16, now I'm 43, a Black young child on the outskirts. My mother was responsible for the house, my sisters. My mother was worked in other houses as a cleaner. And the music education can allow us to get to other places. So if I was asked where our dream ended up, I would say it came to this evening.
Aonde foi parar o sonho colorido? Aonde foi parar? Não lembro o caminho. Aonde foi parar aquele sorriso? Aonde foi parar que anda tão sumido? Será que foi pra lá de Bagdá? Me diga por favor que eu tô indo lá buscar. Não sei se vou achar a criança que perdi dentro de mim, mas não vou desistir. Eu quero ser feliz e seguir o que o coração ainda diz, que pra ganhar o céu, só sendo criança outra vez.
Esperando pra brincar. Aonde foi parar tal felicidade? Dizem que as crianças brincam lá nessa cidade. De bola de sabão, esconde, esconde então, chorando e sorrindo tanto até cair no chão. Se pensa que acabou, já já tudo começa outra vez. Parece não ter fim, mas não é bem assim. O tempo passa rápido, é só olhar pra si. Agora encontrei a criança que existiu dentro de mim. Agora encontrei a criança que existiu dentro de mim. Que existiu dentro de mim.
Vou agradecer aqui a Anelo pela parceria.
I would like to thank here Anelo for the partnership, for being part of our history. Thank you so much for your presentation. While you're getting the stage ready, I'll give some notices. Instituto CPFL and Café Filosófico, I'm start thinking locally, then we go globally. So first of all, I'm really happy to see a full house here to watch Café Filosófico today and the presentation of Instituto Anelo. So thank you so much for being here in the audience. A round of applause to you.
Indo pouquinho mais longe no local, para quem tá...
And going further, for those who are watching us online, on the theater, we had sold out, so there's a screen in front of the square. So if people outside the theater watching, so we are also online transmitting on Instagram of the Institute. I asked you to follow at Instituto CPFL, and we are transmitting and YouTube. So if you don't follow us, look for Café Filosófico at YouTube. Follow us there so you can know more about our programs. We have new videos almost every day, and we have a lot of information from these 20 years. So we are also transmitting live on YouTube of Leandro Karnal, so you can watch us on his channel. So to start that, we're going to see a video for this celebration. Imagine your story as a timeline. How many ups and downs you have been through, Joyce? Hi, everyone. We wanted to share this moment with you. 2023, Café Filosófico CPFL turns 20 years, more than 950 lectures that were done, more than 3,000 hours of recording, more than 2,000 episodes on TV Cultura, a digital community with almost 1 million people, 1,200 videos on YouTube with more than 42 million views. In these 20 years, we have built more than numbers. We built relationships, and we connected stories. All of this was only possible because you is part of this history. So we thank the technical team, we thank all our friends, our speakers, curators, and a special thank you to you. To have a sampling of the topics that we discussed here in these 2 decades, we're going to see some hosts that were part of this history. Hi. At Café Filosófico, a partnership, TV Cultura and CPFL Energia, how we can see the relationship in the modern couples, how the desire is born, what women hired from men and from themselves. Are we more afraid now than in the past? Or the human being was this tormented animal? All the time we are facing small and big decisions, this or that, right or wrong, good or bad. Can we do it or we can't? So this don't get a problem inside of us burning everything around. What to do? Who broke the law of the eternity that we cannot start again? If the ostium is the beginning of the vices, at least it's close to all the virtues. I have learned that my strength is to know all the weakness that have been showed in my being. How work can contribute to change the social composition of Brazil, and we have a new middle class. Today we're going to ask, is there a drug for good? Art is a way of feeling the object. What became is not related to art. And what everyone is looking for is one thing. What's fiction for? To explain, to interpret human reality through fantasy.
A desigualdade entre os homens é dos assuntos mais
Inequality
recorrentes.
among men is one of the more recurring topics of philosophy. It has been approached by Rousseau, Marx, Angela Davis, Dele Gonzalez, and other thinkers throughout history. Today is the topic that's going to be led by Djamila Ribeiro and Leandro Karnal, so let's welcome them with a round of applause.
Apresentar os nossos convidados, a Djamila Ribeiro
So I'm
dos
going to
Santos.
introduce our guest. Djamila Ribeiro dos Santos has a degree in Master of Political Philosophy by the Federal University of São Paulo. She's a writer, coordinator of the sample Feminismos Plurais, and also the guest professor at PUC São Paulo and researcher in German. And Leandro Karnal, he's a historian and he's a doctorate. He's the member of the Academia Paulista de Letras, professor of Unicamp for more than 20 years, more than 1,000 books sold, and his books are bestsellers in Brazil. And Djamila and Leandro, welcome to Café Filosófico CPFL. The stage is yours. Thank you, and it's an honor to be back to Café Filosófico, where I'm since 2006, when I was invited to be part of this team that's so big of speakers. I was part of the celebration of the 15 years of Café. I became friend of Djamila, and now both are immortals for the Academia Paulista de Letras. And it's an honor to talk about this topic that Djamila and I, we had some meetings to debate this. A historian and a philosopher to ask what we have in their divergency. I don't know if we start with Rousseau quote. So please, what made this begin was Jean-Jacques Rousseau launched that study about inequality among men. And this is what we are going to start thinking now with his text. Good evening, Karnal, Djamila, and everyone that are watching us in this Café Filosófico that's special. I start here with the beginning of Rousseau of 1750 about the origin of inequality. What's the most cruel that all the progresses of the human species, they are far from the primitive state. When we get new knowledges, we get a way of getting the most important of all. We have a certain way that the strength of studying the man is what makes us incapable of knowing the man. The first that being surrounded remembered of saying, this is mine, and found simple people to believe on that. It was the true founder of the civil society. How many crimes, wars, misery, and horrors they could spare the human beings, the ones that removing the stakes or closing the holes would scream to their peers, let's not hear to this impostor. We are going to be lost if you forget that this is for all and the land is from no one. This is a good idea on more radical side of Illuminism, and Jean-Jacques Rousseau, we know, talks about this natural man that Djamila could talk more than me because she's from the philosophy area, and the man goes to the civil society. We have the private property and trying to be perfect. This rich word with so many meanings, use the iron, the use of agriculture, so the man becomes different. This difference is the core to understand all of us. The Bible says that the sons of the same father, of the same entity, we are all brothers and sisters. Our Quran states the same, so the fraternity is universal. But at the same time, what the Bible is talking about is identity, it establishes walls. You are the elected people, you need to be away from this land, you're going to punish the Pharaoh, these children of the same father. We have divisions that mark the world until now. Looking at this audience, all the people, we can see physical differences, and it's not possible to see from here, but certainly we have intellectual differences, differences of background, of capabilities at work. There are people that are better for A or B in human skills, but the question would be, what justifies this? Each historian and each philosopher gave one answer, but I want to ask for an image that was made by a photographer of the newspapers Folha de São Paulo 2004. This image is well known that he did in 2004. It circulated the world, it was in the SATs, it was in the cover of books. We had an exhibition in the Tate Gallery of London. So there's a building at the Avenue Giovanni Gronchi in the south area of São Paulo. They have poles. So each floor has a good amount of sun, and they wouldn't get on the way of the other there. A 10 square there, so this building would be as a garden. After a wall, when the road is made by walls, we have the borders with Mexico, the Gaza Strip, so the Berlin Wall. So we have the favela, the community of Paraisópolis, where there's another composition of houses and another composition. This picture can be seen in different ways. It can be read as they are saying that few have a lot, opposite to the majority that have few. So the production of a machine of exclusion, of inequality, a previous machine of when people were born, something that was structured by the capitalism. So it's not about quality, but the goal of the capitalism that is to concentrate this. So the ones that live on the right side would be the beneficiaries of this system. On the left side are the victims of this system. What would be the salary, the owners, and the ones that sell their workforce? If I came before Marx, the wealth of nations, Adam Smith would think that the difference between men is because of the work, by the capabilities. And if Marx is the source of a lot of things that are being said until now by the left wing, so that's the base of a lot of things that's being said so far by the right wing or liberals or people that believe the meritocracy, because on the left wing they have less that. But if they try hard, if they wake up early, if they study, if they do what they need to do, someday they will get to the right side. The other way of reading this image, it's reading this it's wrong that the poor envy the rich people. It's wrong the rich people to not pay a fair salary. It's not wrong the differences in classes. It's wrong to have a lot of material goods, and in 2015 it's wrong this consumism, and we have ecological damage. The social doctrine of the church doesn't condemn the capitalism, but when you have the access of that, this conservative thinking of the Catholicism says that have the desire of changing the Land Act because the envy of the land of the other, and this is a sin.
So these are different thinkings. In the Bible, I see the base for inequality, which is critical, like the prophet Moses. It's a short book, but Moses is a radical in one of the kingdoms, and he talks a lot. He says poor things about the rich. He hates the rich, and he says they are going to be condemned by God, and especially chapters 4 and 5. So all these criticisms by Moses is social. Isaiah is a little different. He's a prince. He has a different view. So it's always a different explanation. So the inequality we see, is it fruit of nature? Are we unequal because we are born differently, physically and psychologically different, and so with art I can produce equality that is not possible. We are not equal because this is part of the human species, or would we be inequality? There will be inequality because it is produced. So humans would be happier, like Rousseau asked, by saying that when inequality comes, there are also extraordinary productions, and so on and so forth. So it's among chaos, it's among conflict, we produce art and literature. Without that, there would be no artistic production or civil society as we know it. So as I empty out all the discourses, come questions like, is it correct to have inequality? Is it possible to revert it? The break of inequality through a socialist revolution produced something that in the old Yugoslavia would be the red bourgeois, now an elite connected to a party with privileges as there is in capitalism. So the unequal societies are more attractive. They attempt to migrate in not lawfully, is from the unequal society to a more capitalist one. So it is a strength of work here in Brazil. In the US, they don't have any legislation to protect labor. So workers, instead of being under the protection of legislation, they want to escape to a place there is no protection from legislation. So there are contradictions to provoke. We don't want to have a response or to guide one side or the other, but to think about that. Is inequality desired by God? And Jesus said clearly when he talked about poor people, he said, poor will always exist. So it doesn't matter what you do, there will always be poor around. So this debate is very important because I have to decide what God thinks about inequality, what philosophers think about inequality, if inequality can be overcome, if inequality is inherent to things, or as Paulo Freire said, if I don't have a freeing education, what happens is that the oppressed one wants to become the oppressor. So the criticism of taking the Tsar in Russia to end the power of Romanov because I want a Bolshevik power is even more repressive, even more pain, even more violent. So dropping equality or inequality and installing what is called the messianic, the land without any evils, or the communist land of Marx, installing this paradise is possible. So these are the matters that we're going to discuss. And after all our lives, what I want to start with Djamila to address from a different perspective is guided by that. Study to be someone. Be careful with your expenses, save so you can have something in your old age. So it's always the ant against the other animal in the La Fontaine fable. So who works, produces, so who doesn't work, like the cicada, can't have anything. So I justify the work, as Adam Smith mentions, from a perspective of instauration of a perfect order. And is this order perfect for whom? So I really like this very socially bad joke of an owner of a company that gathers all the employees and shows his Lamborghini, says, if you wake up early, if you come to work every day and work hard, if you reach your goals and you double your goals, next year I will have 2 Lamborghinis. Naturally, this is an irony about this effort. On the other hand, all the effort of the meritocracy, of the self-financial health, or anything that guides people would say, if you think it will happen, if you do, it will happen. If you work hard, it will there will be the new kingdom. So to whom this discourse concern? Considering again the shocking image done for the anniversary of São Paulo, the idea that the police, the state work for one side of that picture and they serve to control the other side of that image. So this is an image connected to the critical thinking of the left wing. Is the system good? Does it work? These are the matters that matter the most for us to be able to decide, after all, what is the origin of inequality? How can it be overcome? Or even if it should be overcome? Or even if it is something that is an obstacle to humans. And that is why this is an important matter when we vote. When we vote in elections, when we position ourselves in social media, when we educate our kids or our students, when we show ideas or read texts, we have an assumption about inequality and how it should be worked, how it should be analyzed, or how it should be overcome. And all of that comes hand in hand with our topic. After all, the origin is the private property, as Rousseau thought. Contradictions of who proposed that. Rousseau is someone that told to love children but abandon his kids. He defended democracy and he had possessions and explored people with money. Or a biographer, he was a man who loved humanity a lot but hated thy neighbor. So he loved the concept of humanity but was a hard man. He was a hard man. The French Revolution is the experience of many moments of Illuminists, Voltaire and Montesquieu in the beginning, and Rousseau after the Jacobins' instauration and a more radical government with more structural changes in the French government. So you see, there's a lot of things to talk about today, right? And our goal is not providing an answer. Our goal is not giving you just a dogma or a central axle, but wish you to discover what is more adequate to that matter. And based on that, we go to another focus that my friend Djamila is going to analyze in terms of inequality. Good evening to everyone present here. It's a joy to be once again with you, Leandro, here. I participated in Café Filosófico in the peak of the pandemic, so it was recorded in my living room. It was Café Filosófico with the curatorship of Leandro Karnal, so I'm happy to be here again to debate topics that are so important and think about the social origins of the inequality. Interesting that Leandro mentioned this quote by Rousseau talking about private property. And when we think about theories and women theorists considering gender and sex, there was a criticism of Rousseau of the rights of the woman and the citizen, because in the social contract, he didn't think about the woman. So she is a contemporary of Rousseau, killed during the revolution, but in the Declaration of the Women and the Female Citizen, she criticizes Rousseau that didn't take into consideration the matter of the woman, because obviously it was the patriarchy. And so if we think about Simone de Beauvoir, who is a philosopher I have studied for some years, in the second sex of 1949, she reflects about what we would call the female condition philosophy, criticizing many philosophers that didn't take into consideration the woman as a subject, thinking from herself. So she criticizes, saying that women are thought in opposition to men and put in the position of the other, of non-humanity, as if they were the opposition to men. Men, subject, woman, object. And she criticizes many names like Aristotle, who is a great name. Everyone who studies political philosophy is going to study him, but she criticizes him in terms of what he said about women, that women would suffer a natural flaw, as she criticizes São Tomás de Aquino, Santo Agostinho, the scholastics that would say that women is not a wise animal, placing women as an irrational being, as an appendix, as the other. So when she thinks of the category of the other, based on this reflection of Hegel and Lord of Slaves, she says that humanity, when she's thought of, it's thought of man, subject, and a woman is not even taken into consideration, considered as herself. And when she thinks about the woman in herself, she brings all the consequences of what it means to be a woman based on this place. So when she opens the second volume in the second gender, you are not born a woman, you become a woman. She says that the gender comes from the woman. Before we are born, there is an imposition in each society about what it is to be a woman, what is expected of a woman. So when we are born, for example, in Brazil, in a world in which your bedroom is pink, we are going to get refrigerators and stoves as toys, and they say we can do this and that thing, but it's imposed before we are born. So she means that gender is a social construct that is imposed to women, and so regardless of us agreeing with that model or those impositions or not, we are born in a society that is imposed to us, and we become what society expects a woman to be. In this sense, many feminist intellectuals like Alexa Fiotti, a Brazilian one, is going to discuss the sexual division of work, which is another mark of inequality. So in a patriarchal society, there are works, that are jobs that are imposed to women, domestic work, compulsory maternity, the idea that women have to have children, have to stay at home, that certain jobs are for women, certain jobs are for men, and those that are imposed for women are less socially recognized. So coming from this perspective, you have the hegemonic feminist movement and the feminist theory that comes in the 60s. That is very important, with theories that were very important, but also theorized from a universal woman. They are thinking of gender inequality based on the reality of a woman without considering the many other possibilities of being a woman. And then you get into the intersectionality, that means thinking about what it means to be a woman when you intersect one or another way of oppression. If you are a black woman, if you are a poor woman, if you are in a different context like an immigrant or something. So the black theorists are important and the feminists are important, because when we talk about inequality in terms of women, we have to question which women we are talking about. Because when the feminist movement in the 70s in Brazil goes to the street asking for women to have rights in the workforce so they can work, we can't forget that black women got to this country working, but that kind of work was as slaves, and then other work that was not socially recognized as the domestic work. So when we think about inequality, we think about theorists of the critical racial theory or the colonial, counter-colonial theories, they are going to discuss the importance of a structuring element of inequality in our country, which was slavery. So slavery was the base of the economy in Brazil during almost 4 centuries, is a determining factor for building inequality. Once black people were brought by force from Brazil to the Americas, from Africa to the Americas, and they were workforce, they were objects, and there was a process of commercialization of people. So theorists after the colony will say that capitalism is a consequence of the colonialism, because we are talking about people that were commercialized and that generated money to the lords, and they worked under force with no remuneration. So it makes these lords to accumulate capital by exploring the slave kind of workforce. So it is a key element to think about the building of the inequality. In the picture Karnal shows, is very emblematic and is strong and very characteristic for a society like ours. These people that are on the other side of the wall, in the favelas, these people in majority are black. This poverty in Brazil has a color, and it's important to think about classes in a country like ours based on this intersectional perspective of race and gender. Because if we think about working class, and Simone de Beauvoir, in the third chapter of the first volume of The Second Sex, when she criticizes the historical materialism, she recognizes the importance of Marxism, but she will say that the genders is key to think of working class, because the working class is not an abstract mass. When I talk about working class, there is a key difference when I think about the working woman that is going to leave the class by their gender, as well as when I talk about the black woman that leaves her gender through her race. So what are the consequences of these intersections? So Bell Hooks in the US, Kimberly Branshaw coined the woman of intersectionality in 1989, and she's going to talk about the importance of reflecting how much the domination axis work and how the exclusion works. And in Brazil, Lélia Gonzalez was a key person to think about the intersectionality, but Nélia Gonçalves was producing in the Brazilian Portuguese. So much of what she thought was not translated and internationalized. So much of what we know about intersectionality comes from the US. But Nélia Gonzalez was thinking about this concept in the beginning of the 80s. And so her and Marília Lugoni, who is an Argentinian thinker that died very recently, criticized what.
And sometimes we are looking for these answers only in the global north, and we are not looking among us to our own territory and the differences that this inequality are going to produce here in this territory. So to think about inequality of the source of this, how it's built historically in the context like ours, is fundamental to think about race, class, and gender in intersection, and what are the consequences of thinking these oppressions. And that somehow is not a competition of oppression, because sometimes people believe that this intersection, the overlapping of this, what we are comparing, who suffers more, especially on social media, on Twitter, and that people make these discussions become empty, and these are serious discussions. We need to read a book. We cannot create theories with 5 lines that what you have on a Twitter, and we have this hurry of going at Twitter and say, no, it's like this because I have seen this on Twitter, but because I don't like blah, 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 but have you read? No, you need to read to criticize or to show a limit of an analysis, because it's not throwing this analysis away. And unfortunately, this being said like this, I study Beauvoir a lot. I appreciate her work, but obviously Simone de Beauvoir, the Black feminists are going to show some limitation on her analysis, but doesn't mean to disregard her thinking. So going back, the intersection is not overlapping, it's not competition of oppression, And the text that I consider that's fundamental to understand this intersection, and it's not international because it's a Brazilian author, that's Luisa Bairros, in her work, Our Feminism Being Revisited, to think about class, gender, and race, is not ask what is more important for us Black women, race or gender, or ask who suffers more. She's going to say that we need to reflect and think that the Black women are going to experience gender in a different way than white women. And from this concrete data, which conclusion we can get? So it's not saying you suffer more or you suffer less. It's to understand what are the consequences of the intersection of these social phenomena. And Luisa Bairros, on this text, she's going to say that to us, Black women, for example, we cannot decide which oppression is more important. If it's racism, if capitalism or sexism, because the intersection of these oppressions that put the Black women in the base of the social pyramid is to leave the gender by the poverty, by the race that put the Black women on this place. So to think about this intersection is not only an important theory, but it's an important tool for public policies because it gives me a concrete data. I have a demand, so I can claim some conditions for that. So I can ask from the public authorities to have public policies. When we have Lei Maria da Penha, when it was 10 years after this law, there was an important survey about the violence map that shows that 10 years after the law, it decreased the assassination of white women in 10%, and it increased of Black women in almost 55% in the same period of time. So what does it mean? So maybe, of course, the law is important too. It's an important policy that's fundamental. But it shows us that we didn't have this racial ethnical view when they considered this policy. It's not saying to the Black women to report what's happening. These women live in peripheral territories. They cannot call the police. The relationship of the Black people with police, they don't trust. It's not that they feel safe with the police. The majority of the places that provide services for them are in downtown. If they live on the outskirts, they don't have the money for the transportation to get there. So it goes beyond the legal issue. So to think inequality to us is fundamental to, if you think this together, that we cannot consider these structures separately because we have a simultaneous gathering of this that's going to generate these inequalities. And I'm over 10 minutes, right? No, I was thinking while you were talking. So let's check here if we move on. We have a video from Kiko. Maria Maria is the sound, is the color, is the sweat, is the stronger dose and the slower one of a people that laugh when they should cry and they don't leave, they just support, but they need to be strong, they need to desire to win always. When they have bring in the body this thing, so they mix pain and joy. I have chose this excerpt of the song, not just because it belongs to Milton Nascimento, but because I believe that these lyrics bring an important discussion that Luisa Bairros mentioned, our feminism being revisited, that we Black women, we carry this condition. And Milton Nascimento says that brings this mark. So we have this faith on life. So Luisa Bairros, you think about this mark as a marker, a social marker of inequality. This mark that brings in your body the history of the colonialism in our country, the history of sexism in our country, of the exploitation of the workforce. It's important to think what are the means of this mark and not sometimes go and reinforce the speeches that we had this myth of this racial democracy, this romanticized idea that Brazil wouldn't be a racist country, and that this mark wouldn't be important to think about Brazil once that we are a mixed race. And there was an important author to disclaim this myth about ambiguities of racism in Brazil. He's going to say that Brazilian people, they deny racism even though they are caught in the act, because they are saying that that the problem is with the victim, or that they are not racist, because they deny this mark, because the last country of Americas that abolished slavery, so this period of neutralization of Brazil, it's going to deny the existence of racism. So it delayed the creation of public policies to face racism. Because why? They would think about fighting racism if it doesn't exist. So this mark should not only be being said, considered, discussed, but recognized. Because if the Brazilian state doesn't recognize the racism, why they are going to create public policies to face racism? It's interesting to note that the Brazilian state only considered that slavery was a crime against humanity on the document of the Durban Conference in 2001. It's interesting to see that after abolishing slavery, the courage of the European immigrants to Brazil, because we have this whitening process, that we should have a population that should be more white. A lot of people that are descendants of European immigrants, they received lands. We have the German colonies, Portuguese colonies, Italian, Brazilian. Brazil is the country that a lot of descendants from Italian. I went to the south area of Brazil. I was visiting a friend that she's a judge there, and I went to a town called Nova Petrópolis, that the entrance of the city, the most German city in Brazil. And it's interesting that we have 9 colonies there that you can meet these places. And what are these? And decades after this, when finally the Brazilian state recognized racism, when the Black intellectual, the Black movements are going to fight for quotes, because the mark matters, because it creates inequality. A lot of these European descendants that their ancestors received lands, they go against this. They forgot that the land that they received from the Brazilian state, it can be considered that a lot of intellectuals consider one of these affirmative actions of the Brazilian state. So the lack of awareness of our context, the lack of awareness of this mark, or how this mark is produced, of understanding the social source of inequality, we have this alienation that people have the same logic and they go against moving forward because their groups received. So I brought these lyrics because it's fundamental to consider this mark as a fundamental element to inequality. Naturally, Nova Petrópolis is not German. From my city, was the first German colony, so we are, but the other city is not. But jokes aside, it's interesting to see the thinking process of Djamila, because what we desire here is to bring this characteristic as a tradition as a historian, and possibly because of our middle class, of German origin that was created in a countryside city, Catholic. So when I see the history, I go to Rousseau, I go to Marx, I go to the Bible, to Moss, and I got a photographer of newspapers. And Djamila went to women, to slavery, to the differences, the intersections among misogyny, racism, and others. And it's exactly this richness of diversity, because I have a point of view that's seen from one point. I have this when I think the feminism, I'm not I'm going to consider Simone de Beauvoir and Bette Friedman, and she brings a rich list of Black feminists that add to the classic feminism, the white one being European or North American with a different race. So Djamila identified first the historical production of inequality through this modern commerce, that the commerce of human beings. If slavery was a data that happened in African communities for a while, it was local and was not the source of economical production. But when we had introduction of navigations, we have this extensive business. The biggest fortunes, they belonged to human traffickers. So with this data, Djamila answering Rousseau's question, Djamila goes to Geneva and says, Rousseau is historical, it's a machine to produce inequality through ships, is labors of human beings, and the impossibility of education of the base of the colonial power. So when we import immigrants to Nova Friburgo, German, 1824, 1875, Italian, Japanese from 1908. So you give them land and work. You take the immigrant, not always treat nicely, but take them to a hostel. So you take them using a train to the countryside. Sometimes you provide land or work. So you are doing to the white of different origins what was never done with the majority of the Brazilian population that's Black. What does it mean? You have this institution that's an inequality. And the one that won lands in the South region, Rio Grande do Sul, as my ancestors, in 1929, an ancestor from my mother won land in the state of Rio Grande do Sul, the one that won land from the Brazilian state, and had his agriculture with a lot of effort, of course, with a lot of work. People accusing that didn't get more support. He's going to look to the one that never won land and never had access to education, and is going to think that this person doesn't have the discipline of work, the dedication, the person that don't have the desire to move forward, and is going to feel superior, forgetting that this immigration was not Duchess of German, but people with economical problems that were in different cases. And Djamila provided an answer to Rousseau's question. The difference about women, Black population, and poor is a difference that was produced historically with the competition of a socio-economical system and the state. So we see Djamila's position that if the state helped to produce this difference, the state is responsible for helping overcoming this. And Djamila asked for public policies. So she doesn't have this liberal position and say to overcome the situation, we need public policies. To overcome all of this, we leave this big debate, and especially the ones that don't use the public health system. Pandemic had the power to refuel the high middle class Brazil and the vaccination process. This was a revelation. If I don't use public transportation, if I don't take my kids to the public school, if I don't use the public health department only during a pandemic, even though I want to choose the vaccine that I think that's more suitable, if I don't do this, I consider that this investment of the state is too much, and so on. What does it mean? Different views of the state on both sides of the picture that we analyzed. And first, I need to identify these views. And when I criticize a thinker, I'm not going against Simone de Beauvoir saying that she doesn't know anything. I'm identifying her an effort that's going to flourish in Foucault. That's the production, the cultural production in things as gender identity. A cultural production and historical production. Foucault, when he has the sexuality history, he shows that when I classify the sexual characteristics, I'm trying to control that. Oscar Wilde's going to say that classifying is limiting. When I need to say that someone has this or that, or is this or that, getting this idea that theology had one name and medicine was talking about, the theology was talking about possessed, and medicine is going to talk about hysterical women. So medicine has gender, that Dr. Charcot talked about women, influenced Freud. So I work from the point of view that produces this difference. And two efforts mark a historian: to change the nature of relationships, showing that they are not nature, showing that they are intentions, and remove the immemorial characteristics of time that has always been like that. Nothing has been always been like that. Everything gets transformed. And mentions Marx, men make history, but not the way that they would like to happen. I was trying to consider some points of Djamila's intervention to show how she's giving an answer to questions that Rousseau, our epigraphy from the beginning, was showing, so giving solutions and giving chance us to think about the solutions. But we need to move forward. So let's move forward. I'd like to thank Djamila and Leandro. If you're watching online, if you want to ask questions to Leandro and Djamila, you can do it. You can write on the comments from YouTube or Instagram. You here at Campinas, if you want to ask questions, you can go to Instagram and write there your question. We're going to select the questions and you're going to read the questions. So to start, 20 years of Café Filosófico, so we're checking our history to think again, and we are going to go to the first video that we have, thinking of modernity, mentioned by a lot of speakers at Café. That 2013, we recorded him at his house. Let's see the video.
Pretending that they have recipes for happiness, don't believe them. They are, hoodwink you. I would never dare to give such an advice. Well, I am not comparing myself with Socrates, but very many philosophers, contemporary philosophers, consider life of Socrates, his personality, which he constructed, as the most perfect, relatively perfect, which you can imagine. But what does it mean? Does it mean that if Socrates' kind of life, which he selected, is the perfect solution for Socrates anyway, does it mean that we all should imitate Socrates and try to be like him? No. The answer is on the contrary, because precisely Socrates considered a secret of his happiness in that he, on his own, by his own will, created the form of life which he lived. People who imitate somebody else's form of life, somebody else's model of happiness, are not like Socrates. On the contrary, they betray his recipe. They betray his recipe, because his recipe precisely, well, you can translate it in a simple term, saying that for every human being there is a perfect world made especially for him or for her.
Beautiful idea. When I listen to Bauman, I want to be better. I want to be a better person. He was an extraordinary person. And based on what Bauman mentioned, not follow the model, neither Socrates' models, because Socrates' models had its limits. I'm going to ask something to Djamila. I told her I want to provoke her. This is what friends do. We embarrass people, right? And so Djamila brightly analyzed the historical powerful ties that we have produced over the Black population, especially Black women, the difficulties, the distrust, the fact that everyone that carries the mark is going to be followed in the supermarket by a security guard, is going to be interrogated, is going to be treated differently. This is obvious, and who denies that, at least, is someone without any character, to say the least. But if society is so incapable of giving the Black population, the Black women, any possibility, if they oppress, if they are white, male, aggressive, if it benefits people, especially white men, how do you describe yourself? A person that wasn't born with a silver spoon, that was born in the family of an illustrated union man in the port of Santos, was a champion of chess, had a great university, is a master in a national successful star, happy, annoyingly beautiful, and all that. So my question is, if it is not possible to overcome inequality and it's an iron crown over population, why aren't there more Djamilas, or really provoking? Can all be a Djamila? Wow, what a provocation. No. For this reason, of course, we are talking here about the matter of structure, and this is undeniable because we are talking about opportunities, and opportunities are different depending on the mark that we carry with us. So it's going to make me an exception in this system. I was the only Black student in my class. I looked around, and women like me, who had the mark like me, they were cleaning the university, they were not sitting and watching a lesson. So I know I could study because I was part of an education of a generation that was part of public education projects, and I took the opportunities. This was something that I'm going to defend. It's not a matter of capacity but rather opportunity. But also, it's important to remember that Black people, we are not like in among each other. So this is the idea of homogenization. In Africa, we were Bantus, Kemitis, and with the colonization, we became Black. The Black, as if we were all the same, if we had different cultures, languages, traits, and this homogenization culture makes people see stereotypes and believe we have a common essence and deny our multiplicity, different ways of being, different forms of acting, thinking, and that is important to take into consideration so we don't reinforce this logic that homogenizes us. Usually people say in social media that I should answer and reply to everything that Black people do in this country. And they say, but why do I have to say, oh, but she's Black and she did that? And I say, well, if I write to my white people, to Karnal, every time a white man in politics is doing something stupid, I'm going to spend my day doing that. But Karnal is seen as an individual, and I am seen as a mass, as all the Black. So I have an author that says that the individual, the person that comes from a privileged group that always share the idea of humanity like a white man, they are treated as an individual. If a soccer referee makes a mistake, the individual is going to be responsibilized. This person made this mistake, the fans are going to be angry at him. But if a woman or a Black person does that, they say, look, women are not made for referees, or a Black man can't be. We are not going to share, and we can't deny the individual. So, the same way, I had black colleagues that had the opportunity of studying, but couldn't maybe have the same recognition in their work. So I would reply to conclude with the maximum of Sartre that I like a lot about, I like Beauvoir better, but I do like Sartre. And when he says in the matter of method, because when he talks about the being and the nothing, he was criticized by Marxist intellectuals, and Beauvoir never denied the structure. It's very different. But Sartre then went for this matter, and he says, we have a bourgeois poet that considers the structural matter. He is a poet, he is bourgeois, he came from a place he didn't have indignity, he could study, he had access to the cultural assets, so he comes from a privileged point of view. But not all bourgeois poets as Bovary, because they can come from the same place with access to possessions and all that. They didn't have the same recognition of Bovary. So what he says is that there is a structure, and then later he's going to get deeper into the structure and say that Marxism is a matter, but there is a subject, and we can't deny the subject. We can't deny the construction of our subjectivity. And in this sense, I agree with existentialists that you can't deny structure. It's there, it's given, and it's going to determine opportunities, who lives in indignity and who doesn't. It's going to give opportunities to some, but not to others. And but we can't deny the structure. So our bourgeois poets were not Bovary, but they didn't suffer indignity, and they didn't have to go through situations in life that we consider indigenous. So, of course, we can't deny this subject. And Sartre said that we are all génie. We are also génie. We have questions? Yes. It's a night of celebration, so congratulations, many congratulations. So I'm going to synthesize what Rafael Fritz says, that it's good to live in a world where you too exist. So congratulations to you and to 20 years of Café Filosófico and the CPFL Institute. And so some figures, we are transmitting on YouTube, and we had a reach so far of 100,000 people that are watching your talk live. And so if you don't follow our channel on YouTube, look for Café Filosófico CPFL, and you are going to have access to 20 years of history. And before the questions that are coming, we have a questioning video for you.
Muito boa noite.
Good evening, and thank you for the opportunity. Congratulations to Café Filosófico for the 20 years, talking about what really matters, debates and themes that are so different. We need it, and congratulations. Djamila, feel hugged by me, my friend Leandro, kisses from Lisboa, and to the whole audience in Café Filosófico. So when we talk about inequality, we have different paths. So I want to give a concrete example of a practical matter of what we experience every day. So let's look at a group A with all the advantages and a group B that has no benefits. Probably group A have a sorted life, but who is in group B? These people are going to face barriers, are going to face obstacles because they wouldn't have access to education, housing, and so many other things. So besides all these difficulties, we may not forget that there are prefabricated, preconceived ideas as a fiction. When they say that people in group B that don't have the same opportunity as the other, these people are lazy, for example. And this legitimizes the penalization, the sanction. besides being lazy, these people, they don't give any profitability to work, and this legitimates what? The low salaries, the unemployment. Besides being lazy, besides not giving in the profitability, they are seen as a clock ticking bomb about to go off. They are reactive, so that justifies or legitimizes somehow the police violence. And I could give so many more examples. This is studied. So I think it's important to take it in consideration. We don't have the same opportunities and we don't start from the same point. If I didn't have money so far to pay for intensive French or English German course, I'm going to miss on opportunities to work in other companies. This is another example. So I think it's worth it reflecting on that, and congratulations on the topic. And I think it's something that we have to reflect on to see the practical side of the situation, the way it influences the lives of people in Group B that don't have advantages, benefits, and have to face battles in life in so many fronts. So this is the matter of the pressure is so big. We have to prepare more. So maybe there is an opportunity one day. So I ask, are institutions ready to welcome these people that don't have advantages and have to fight every day for us? Conceição, if you don't know, is one of the stars of the Portuguese TV, a dear friend. She likes to be in crowded places like Yemen, to do some articles where the history is being written, and she receives awards in Europe. So it's a privilege to be friends with her. She sometimes puts cilantro in her fish, but she's a very good host after that. After some years, I forgave her for this ethical lapse. But one of the things about everything she said so beautifully is about A and B. And as a classic humanist, I really get into this idea of the value of life. So let's consider a recent tragedy. 3 doctors were killed in a kiosk in Rio. A terrible tragedy, apparently by mistake. They were executed by mistake, and their executors were executed as well. The death of 3 humans, 3 doctors, caused a national commotion, and I'm added to this commotion. But let's think about the news. If it were the massacre in a bar in a community, 3 people were killed in this bar in a community. We are selective with the value of lives of A and B. It's not the idea of decreasing the value of the lives of Group A, but we are selective with wars. We are commoted by some wars and forget about the others. The press don't announce Eritrea, Yemen, South Sudan, where more people die than in the current wars, the ones ongoing. The press forgets about oppressions of the Horinji group in Myanmar or the massacres that are later, and some others are central. So it's important for us to give intention and attention to all these massacres. But why do we always select from groups A and B which lives should we mourn and in which lives should we feel grief and which lives are just indifferent to what happened to them? So massacres with Europeans, attacks in New York, murders in France are completely different from our position when the same thing happens in Africa. So if Conceição is talking about groups A and B, talks about opportunity and job, which of course logical, my core question is life in itself. Why don't we think about a category of life with an absolute value, and we mourn life when there is a social, ethnical identity or just a class theory. I find it interesting when Conceição talks about Black people being put as lazy or incapable. And if we are talking about inequality and their origin, there is no way of not talking about the scientific racism, the biology theories in the 19th century for the domination increased the idea of that Black people are inferior as a race, that are connected to strength, for body strength, and we have theologians that defended this idea that there is an inferiority of the Black population. And today, of course, we produce science and nobody's going to say that, but it is present in our social memory and the way this country is structured. This didn't stop existing. So this idea has to be discussed, that this was thought and built and used as a way of domination, and that it's present up to this day. So let me give you an example. In 2018, I was going to Germany to participate in a program for Angela Davis professor. So I was for a week in Frankfurt in the University of Goethe, and I was boarding in the airport.
So I was in the boarding area of the airport, and a lady saw me, and here in Brazil, people like to be inconvenient. They like to disturb. She was disturbed, and she wants to know what you're doing there. There's no way. And she was looking at me, staring at me, and I put my earbuds, and I tried to do something different, and she got closer to me, a white old lady, and said, "Hi, how are you?" I nod. I said, "You are going to go to this flight to Germany?" Yeah. So no, are you traveling? I just did like this. I was in the boarding area. So we're going to go to this flight to Germany. I said, yes. And she, "What are you going to do there? Are you going to dance?" I said, "No, are you?" She said, "No, I'm not." And she got offended. So she could ask me, but when I asked her, "So do that," I asked to the person. She got offended. She said, "No, I'm not." I said, "No, me neither." And then she took her place. She thought I was rude because you're rude in these conditions. And I was thinking about this. Probably she never read Rubinot or Nina Rodrigues, but she imagined that a woman like me, with my characteristics that carries this mark, couldn't be going to Germany to be a professor. I was going to dance and was not ballet. And it wouldn't be a problem if I was going there to dance samba. But to believe that women like me can only go there and do that. I love samba. So it's something really important in our country, but she thought that I only could go for that. So she connected me to the body in a sexualized way. And this is present in our society, the way that we see Black people. So Lima Barreto, that was a Brazilian writer, not recognized as he should, he has a sentence that Conceição is discussing. He says that intellectual capacity of Black people, it's always considered at first, and white people later. People want to know first, does she know this? Doesn't she? She doesn't know. People sometimes explained what I was researching because they don't believe that I know. Does she know? So this is present when we are surprised when we see a Black person being part of that space and not serving there. So this is part when we get shocked when we see a Black person in some places. So we need to investigate, where is this coming from? Where is the surprise coming from? We need to investigate that. And this is present in our structure, in our society, this racism. And the scientific racism has a main role in this. Why should I explain myself every time if I'm in a place? It happened to me. I was a secretary in São Paulo, and I had a meeting I'm the human resources secretary, so I got to the front desk and I showed my ID. I said, you have a meeting with whom? With this person. And he looked at me and said, no, today he has a meeting with the human rights secretary. And said, yes, that's me. He said, oh, sorry. So the person, it's so inside her that the person doesn't consider that could be me. Of confusing Black people all the time. Where is this coming from? So we need to think that comes from this place to connect the Black people to the physical strength. They are not developed intellectually, so they can be a slavery workforce. Was used as a theory to justify slavery. So it's fundamental to think and go against this scientific racism that's in the roots of our society. So every time we look at Black people as lazy, but they built the wealth of this country. So how are they lazy? Black women go to the outskirts 4 a.m. They are waiting the bus to go to work to support their family. The majority of people that support the family are Black women. So where people think that they are lazy? So we're talking about access to opportunity of building this. So we put Black people in this place. It's not because I'm Djamila that I don't go through this. I'm a Black woman in a society that has the racism in its structure. I'm always at airports, and no one asked me if I was going to dance. So I have a new pain because of that. As no one asked this to you, you talk really well about you're safe when you were born. This is really strong. But I also tell you, as you said, that there aren't other Djamilas. We don't have different Karnais. That man that came from your place, your colleagues that came from the same social place that you, all of them are safe, probably somehow, but they are not Leandro Karnal, and they don't dance either. So no one from Karnal's family dance. But when I once said that I was safe when I was born, I'm not disregarding that. More than 40 years, I wake up at 4 a.m., that I produce a lot up to night, that I work on Saturdays, on Sundays, that I spent my young age, my youth, studying languages and piano. I have read a lot. I have fought to get to the places, to get to São Paulo to study. When I went to Paris to study, I struggled. I'm not minimizing my effort, but there are other people that are doing this effort too, and other that don't. What I mean is the society is naturally friendly to the white man. It's naturally inclined to the white man. If to you there's a deficit or a culture about your knowledge, and the reaction of a woman that reads Kubono that she doesn't know, to me is the opposite. People imagine that I know more than I actually know. And when someone says something, an author, then they tell me, Leandro knows. Maybe I have never heard about the author. I have no idea of who that person is. So the Black feminist that you read, I know too. But I nodded. So to give the audience the feeling that I read everything, but I know just 2 Black feminists. But there's the opposite. The authority, as the author, as you mentioned, our dearest Lima Barreto, that wrote so many books, the authority of the average white man, the professor, the white man as a police officer, it's pre-existing. You don't need to affirm that. As you mentioned, when I make mistakes, we have 3 things, or an open society at marriage, or a mother that had erotic work or about sexual orientation, but it's always related to me. But every time that's a woman or a Black person or someone from the northeast of the country, this represents everything. So all your friends didn't pay me, but there's a Jewish friend, it's because the Jewish don't pay people. Everyone's sleeping after lunch, but if someone that was born in a certain state of Brazil, you have an indication that on that state doesn't move forward. So when I say I was born safe, is that the society is prepared to see in the man something better than he is. So I'm going to give you a concrete example. So when we're talking about inequality, the majority of the car accidents, when people die, the majority of them, the person driving is a man. This is not opinion. This is mathematical. I'm talking about data. The insurance agencies, they don't provide discount to men. So women kill less people, but when you see a woman turning on a wrong place, usually people say, oh, it must be a woman. So I deny the fact that the humanity was born in Africa, and the Egypt was one of the first places as human species was born in Africa. So I classify the world with Europe. So we have the close Orient and the other part. So that's why it was easy to me, or I didn't put some effort, but I was born safe because of this thing that comes before me. As you decreases who you actually are. So both of us, we worked hard, we played chess, but as I said, when you are part of Academia de Letras, you have learned on the chess game that who goes first are the white. So the first move on the game are the white pieces. So the black pieces, they play on defense initially. So this is the core of this metaphor. I was born safe. It's not that I stopped working. I have money until the rest of my life, especially if it's tomorrow. If I die tomorrow, I have money for that. But I cannot stop working the rest of my life. I need to work. What drives me is my bills to pay, but the society accepts me easily. As we see in a beautiful movie about the spouse of a literature Nobel winner, she wrote a book, but it was easier if the husband would take the books to the publisher. So two white people, differences inside categories, and this is something important. When I say that I was born safe, I didn't mean that I didn't have my efforts. As I got to some place, other people with this from the same skill, the same category, couldn't get, but no one is living on the streets. No one broke these connections. What can happen? Of course, but we need to hear some questions. Actually, it's just one question. We ran out of time for this night, so I'm going to get a question that came from the audience through Instagram that summarizes the feeling. Fernanda says, this night she had the privilege of being in the audience to hear you live, and she asks, she would like to understand your view of how inequalities pushed us as a society to the extremes that we are experiencing, and if history and philosophy has examples of overcoming inequalities. I go first. For sure, being an equal country as Brazil is, in a recent history, we had some progressist conditions that created some changes in this country. We see that this disturbed some part of the society. when we had the law for the house workers to have the same position, the same rights that people that work as maids in Brazil, there were some hates. We have some association of the people, the owners of the houses, that we need to pay more for the maids. So we have this colonial view. So this was aggressive. People were talking about this. They were feeling brave to talk about this. About the racial quota, I remember that I worked in an organization for a Black movement in the end of the 90s, the beginning of 2000, and it was a strong discussion, 2001. And the things that we have heard on TV about this were really aggressive and violent. So for sure, the fact that we are an equal society, that we only have places for the racist society, so some advancements, it's going to generate some disturbances in a part of the society that make these places natural. So we have another problem in Brazil of a middle class that thinks that's rich. A middle class doesn't know that they are worker, that they are a working class. I make 15,000 reais per month, but if you stop working, especially in São Paulo, you need to pay rent and so on. The person wants to get far. But in the middle class, we have people that are paying bad to the people that work at their houses because they want to have a maid as a status. So we despise the manual work, so have 4 centuries of slavery. We believe that we don't need to pay for that. So we need to identify the roots of our country as a violent country. This logic that Brazil, it's really nice, of happy people. There's one side of that, but we are a violent country that was born in violence of the indigenous and Black people. We need to say this. We sell an idea to the other countries that we are an amazing country of the racial democracy, that everyone gets along in Brazil, when we know that the relationships in Brazil are deeply violent. And when these relationships, we start seeing this with different eyes, and we see different access. This is going to bring a hate that's really big from those that made these places natural. I remember about the discussions about the quota. White people say, "What? But I will not have my position." No, the position is the ones that can pass on the test, but they believe that the position belongs to them. If we go to a place that we are a majority, why this place has these different people here? They don't understand that this should be a space for all of us, but because of the inequality, we don't have access to that. So Brazil is a country that shocks me when people sometimes tell me, but we go to Europe, other countries, don't we feel racism? Yes, but I feel in my country too. Sometimes I feel a foreigner in my own country. Brazil is a violent country that people say, do you know who you're talking to? People that consider last names, that we are ashamed from our roots, that we like everything that comes from Europe. They say, no, but my ancestors were European, and we're really proud of that. We feel the superiority because of that. I have heard this from Portuguese descendants that lived in the same neighborhood, but as they were white and descended from Portuguese, on their minds, they would be different from us, the Black people that lived there. As Beauvoir is going to say, how the dominant class used this, because the white poor person is going to say, Beauvoir, at least I'm not a dirty Black, I'm a white working person. And these differences that are mentioned in this country like this, and when we start talking about this, and I wrote lugar de fala, when we talk about from our social position, when we think about this, when we mark the main character about this, we see the disturbance because they are marking us. You are a white woman, you are a Black woman, I'm universal. When you mark them and say, you are a white man, oh, this is racism. Why are you saying that I'm a white man? Because they thought they were universal. They believe that they don't come from a specific place. They don't understand that masculinity and being white are identities. They believe just the other have identities, the Black women that are talking about identity, but being white is an identity. So if being white, in Brazil, they don't see themselves, if they believe that discussing racism is only talking about being Black, we don't move forward. The white people need to consider what means being born white in a society like ours. And to discuss gender inequality is not discuss feminism, is discuss the male part, that the fifth country of that women die. So the building of masculinity is based on violence, on the logic of violence. If the men don't discuss masculinity, how they're going to change that, this masculinity that kills rape in this country as an epidemic. But it's always the other, the problem of the other, the one that we consider the other. It's problem of the women that now is talking about this. The problem is not this. It's this feminists talking about this. Why are you talking about this now? You want to create problems and disagreements between men and women. The problem is not having the problem, is to talk about that, identify and trying to find a solution. So I don't believe that's another path of doing this. We need to continue doing this. But to conclude, I think that we need to learn to have dialogues among us. To disagree from the other doesn't mean to treat the other as an enemy. And in social media nowadays, I have a PhD in discussion in social media. I have a doctorate on this. Twitter, especially, I think that's awful. People, or you agree with me or you're my enemy, even people from the same field. And we are not debating, we are reproducing a logic that we say that we go against. So we need to ask how I'm going to strengthen what I'm saying that I want to face. Because I cannot treat people that disagree from me on the idea. I'm not talking about people that want to oppress me as enemy. We are in a moment that we have dichotomies, we have toxic spaces that we don't want to talk to the person because we have this arrogant position and we don't understand that people that are reproducing that are not fascist people. Sometimes they don't have information in a society that's full with fake news, and we should try to talk.
But reflect on how they're reinforcing this logic that we legitimize the walls, we don't build bridges. Just to conclude, because we ran out of time, with a saying that I use in some talks when the topic is that inequality exists in all the countries in the world, but sometimes inequality denies the humanity of people. So there is inequality everywhere, but the role of the state is not to ensure paradise, but as the conservative says, avoid hell. And the saying that I always use whenever I hear about this topic to complement what Djamila says, oh, it's just talking, it's just noise. I always say that behind that there is a straight white man that wants to offend everyone without any causes for a lawsuit, when racism was not a crime and attacking gay people or women was almost good taste in our society. So this talk is about a self-esteem man wishing for a pastime. So this is an expression we should avoid, but we ran out of time. So Karnal, Djamila, thank you all so much. And thank everyone that came to Campinas, everyone who are on YouTube or on Instagram. Thank you. But I don't want the last words to be mine. I want it to be yours because you are the guest of the evening. So please, your last words. Thinking is dangerous. It hurts. It bothers. But in this world, we live of slogans and aggressions and, having the final say. Thinking is a need for everyone. Apart from the crime and ethics, everything should be discussed. removing crimes and ethics breaches, we have to discuss all the other things. Thinking is what approaches us from civilization. Not doing so makes us closer to the barbarian. So this project of Café Filosófico is of people saying different things so we can think. So we can go back to empower ourselves and be the main character, being a critical citizen in this country. Djamila, please. I want to thank once again you, Leandro. I'm glad to be here celebrating 20 years of Café Filosófico. I have watched it a lot. While I was at university, I watched it every week. And I would say a saying that I like of Grada Guilomba that says, we should stop this dialoguing with the voices of the past. It's not that we shouldn't study the people that came before us, but this past in the meaning of sometimes we waste time and energy with things that don't build. And it's important to look at this country that works, the Brazil that works. There are bad things in this country, unfortunately, but great things too, that we should give more visibility, that we should talk more. And sometimes we waste time discussing with haters. I learned from you. I stopped doing that instead of visibilizing what is good, what is nice. So I would say that it's important to talk to the voices that want to talk so we can think of a future. Utopia is only possible if we believe in it.
Tivesse derrubado o microfone, né? Foi
Até à
ótimo.
frente. Obrigado, gente. Obrigado. Obrigado pela presença. Obrigado.
Thank you all for your presence. Thank you so much. Sunday. So when we age, we have to look at ourselves, to the series Life in Movement and the movements of life, that are things that when you cross a desire when you're 30, 40, it doesn't make sense anymore when you're 70. A debate about aging. So maybe at aging, the way the old person is perceived in the society with discriminations, maybe it's harder to have resources to deal with changes on Sunday at 7 p.m. at Café Filosófico.